What's going on, guys? Max here from Maury's Reef. Today I'm going to show you guys how I keep this tank sparkling clean. So a lot goes into keeping a reef tank clean, and I will say this is a very good video to watch if you are getting into the hobby or planning on it, because this is kind of a expectation that you can have when you have a reef tank, and the bigger the tank, the more work you're going to be doing. This video was kind of hard to film because while I was cleaning, I had to move the camera around. So it took me about 2 hours for a really dirty tank, but I would say on average, I spend about an hour a week cleaning my tank. Luckily, I just went home for vacation and I let the tank sit for about a month. And when I came back, it was covered in algae. I'll go ahead and roll that clip now. As you can see, the tank is okay. It's just absolutely filthy. The whole glass is covered in this super thick algae, but I can see that my fish are doing all right. I got a peek at some of my coral and my inverts. Everyone looks fine. This here is my auto feeder, which is covered in salt creep. This here is my camera that I was able to use to watch the whole thing while I was away. Water temperature, salinity is okay, and our ATO is very low, but not empty. Anyways, this thing is a mess. And without further ado, let's get into it. So this video is going to be a little bit different than normal. I'm going to go ahead and do a voiceover over my cleaning, kind of explaining what's happening and then give you some tips along the way. Here, I'm just starting by taking everything off the aquarium. That includes the auto feeder and pellet ring, that lid, and then you'll see later on I also removed the power head to be able to access all of the glass to clean. And this lid is super easy to clean. Once I take it off the tank, I'll put it in the sink and just spray it off with some tap water, removing any debris, leftover food from the auto feeder or salt creep, and then I'll dry it off with a towel and put it to the side. And once everything's done, just put it right back on top. Now we're gonna go ahead and use our magnet scraper and scrape off the bulk of the algae. This is probably the most satisfying part of cleaning my tank. And as you can see, that magnet scraper just melts through everything like butter. This is super thick algae, so it does take a couple of passes. And I will mention I am using the Nano Flipper float. This is the smaller one that I use really well in my BioCube, but I think the water box is a bit thicker glass. So for that, I might need to upgrade to the normal flipper. For now, go ahead and relax and watch me scrape this glass. This is a turkey baster, and you can find them at pretty much any store. And what I'm doing here is just blowing off any of the debris, dust, detritus, or leftover food that gets caught in the rocks. You would be surprised how much leftover food gets caught in the crevices of your rocks. And the danger of this is that the algae will consume this leftover food and grow really big tufts of algae in the hardest parts to reach in your tank, which can be a huge problem later on, especially if it's nuisance algae like this hair algae. It's kind of difficult to see with how much debris is already in the water from the scraping, but the purpose of this is to push all of that debris into the water column to be caught by your vacuum, and what's left over to be caught by your mechanical filtration. I'll sometimes even do this twice a week and just let my filter socks catch whatever they can, because again, any detritus that's sitting on your rocks will cause algae, which is very unsightly and can be potentially dangerous. This part is pretty self-explanatory. I'm just taking a toothbrush and scrubbing every part of the back chamber that I can. At this point, I also remove the power head and give that a pretty deep scrub. This part of the tank does not touch water, so a lot of times you'll see things like dust, salt creep, and just overall gunk that accumulates on the walls. You want to make sure to clean that off at least once a month so these things don't fall into your tank. Very simple process, but just as important as everything else. I also want to mention that here I am taking out the auto top off sensor and giving that a super deep scrub. This is one of the most critical parts of your reef tank, as this tells the auto top off system when it needs to replenish fresh water. So you want to make sure this is perfectly clean. That way it's reading the water level accurately as possible. Now we can unplug our ATO and begin our water change. So this is the most important part of cleaning your tank. If you were to ignore every step that I did, as long as you're doing your water change, you will be okay, because what a water change does is it extracts all of the old water and replaces it with fresh salt water that has all the nutrients that your fish and corals need to grow. If you don't have a siphon yet, I highly recommend buying one that has this squeeze ball attachment. all the OG reefers know, back in the day, the worst thing was getting a mouthful of salt water. This process is called gravel vacuuming, and essentially, if you watch my thumb very closely, I'm opening up the tube to allow sand and debris to flow into the tube, and then using my thumb to crimp the tube, which stops the flow and lets the sand fall back down while keeping the debris in the chamber to suck into your bucket. This is extremely important, and I think the biggest mistake that beginners make is not gravel vacuuming or doing it incorrectly. So take the time to learn this because it will greatly improve the health of your reef tank and the look of your sand bed. Now here's a pro tip. Once your bucket is about halfway full, you're going to want to go ahead and remove your mechanical, biological, and chemical filtration. In this case, my foam pad, my media, and my carbon. I'm going to rinse those things out in my dirty salt water. The reason we're doing it in the dirty water is because you're going to have to throw it out anyways, and doing it in a bucket of clean water isn't going to make a huge difference. The goal here is just to catch any leftover debris that the filter sock couldn't catch. And the reason we're doing this in salt water and never in fresh water is because we want to make sure we're keeping all of the bacteria that is accumulated on these items. Once that's done, you can go ahead and put them back in. Now that the water level is low enough for us to get our hands in the tank, I'll go ahead and take my algae pad and clean up any algae that I couldn't get with the scraper, which also includes the back panel. I don't always do the back panel, but since I was away for a while, a ton of that nuisance hair algae built up on the back, and this is our official super deep clean, so we can't cut any corners. Now we can go ahead and put on some fresh filter socks. I also put on the power head at this time. I did not include how I clean my filter socks in this video, but I will be making a video on that in the future. Essentially, I have 3 pairs of filter socks, and every time they get dirty, I'll rinse them out in the sink and put them in a bucket. And then once all 3 pairs are dirty, I'll put them in the laundry with some bleach, only bleach. And afterwards, I'll let them soak in a bottle of chlorinated water overnight, and they're good to go. Another quick tip here, make sure to heat your salt water before adding it to the tank. I've made this mistake before. When you dump cold salt water into the tank, it could shock and kill your fish. Now we can go ahead and add our water into the tank. And once this is done, we can take a towel and wipe off the rim of the tank, as well as the outside panels, the top of the cabinet door, and the edge of the tank above that cabinet door to make sure no water is outside the aquarium. And the final step is just taking my ATO and switching that old jug out for a new one. Quick tip here, make sure you put down a towel. You don't want water getting on any of your equipment. And just like that, we're officially done with a full day of maintenance. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this quick video on how to clean your tank, and it helps you decide whether or not you're ready for a reef tank of your own. If you guys have any questions on what I did, or you want to see the video of me deep cleaning my equipment, feel free to drop it down in the comments below. As always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.